didn't start with a very good, with a cover page, and that's, I couldn't think of any title to give it for this presentation. My name is Adjo Kisser, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. It's been a pretty jam-packed week. Also a jam-packed 5 weeks since I arrived here in Cape Town. And I've had to even value very still moments. There was a time when I came and I fell sick, and all of this gave me a lot of time to think through my life and my work and sit with myself. And I recall meeting Nkuli Mabaso one late afternoon in Kumasi after a short back and forth on WhatsApp with her. And this was after she had come back from the 3rd edition of the Exit Frame Script Lab from Tamale. And I had encountered her work through a presentation by some students from the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology's Department of Painting and Sculpture, where I teach. So there was a natural excitement when I met Nkuli Mabaso, because I had encountered her work at least through that presentation. And it was almost like a moment of just being starstruck. Yeah, but the moment I saw her, I remember a very warm reception and a very characteristic bright smile. And it made it very easy for us to have a conversation. It made me feel comfortable talking to her. So we easily just went on talking about how life is and how she's doing, as though we knew each other from years ago. And it was the result of this conversation that led me here. She ended up connecting me to Nomusa Makubu, and I came here. So this conversation is possible because of Nkuli Mabaso, and I want to thank her for this. And it's been 2 years in the making, because this conversation happened 2 years ago. I was excited to see Cape Town. I am excited still about the encounters that have been established, and I was excited to see Cape Town because of the long roster of artists and the vibrant artistic life that Cape Town has. And it didn't disappoint. I have gone through the city, I've encountered several artists, I have interacted with them. I've also seen very interesting things around the city besides artist work, and it's been good. I'm very, very thankful. I've learned from artists strategies, methods, processes. So it's been a good 2 years of working this out. So I'm thankful to the entire team of the Creative Knowledge Resources here in Michaelis School of Fine Arts for an opportunity to be here and to learn from the city. It's been a long road to get here, and Nomusa Makubu is definitely a key part of this. I'm thanking her for deciding that this trouble was one she wanted to have. And I want to also thank Amo for helping me just settle in. I want to thank the entire Black Star Lines team for shaping me in ways I could never have imagined. I think it's the only reason why I'm here. It's because of the love and the warmth they've given me, and it's how well they've shaped me and my imagination. So in these past few weeks, I've met artists, I've mentioned, encountered their processes, methods, lives. I've been inspired by them. I met Uhuru Falafala, articulate woman, extremely captivating. And I'll be drawing from all of these experiences. To be a well I will be visiting for a very long time. However, I also saw some things. I encountered situations and people who have armed me with language for describing my work, and I'll get into it shortly. I think that there is something about my process that feels like there's a difficulty with expressing it. It feels like language is not enough in explaining it or describing it. And all of these encounters just armed me with language for describing salient processes within my work. Yeah, and I would have never imagined that one of these important encounters would have been an encounter with sea jellies. Yes, so in a series of photographs provided, I will attempt to get you into my practice. Yeah. So I started off as a painter from the Department of Painting and Sculpture and the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. And although, I started off painting as, and these were a few of the experiments that I had done. But they were inspired by literature and interest in some literary works, and some of these literary works had inspired characters that became dominant within my work. So typically a grinning face, smiling characters. They looked very much like my face, round and and they were very they appeared in several places in Accra and Kumasi. And this was my very first public experiment, trying to show it at the Chalewote Street Art Festival. But a lot of the processes were painterly. But after a while, I was interested in allowing for the work to create a condition for people to move along rather than just stand, as most paintings would have you do. So I wanted movements implied in the way the work was installed, and this is why the scroll became a dominant form in projects at this time. But after a while, after several experiments, I started to work with, there was an exhibition, If You Love Me, curated in 2014, I think, and that's me standing right there with my lecturer. Very good times. And we were trying to create this work. We're running out of time, and as a result of that, we needed a number of people to help us build the work so we could hit the deadline for the exhibition. And so it was, I had to translate all of the things I had been doing on the scroll onto this billboard. And it had to be created within such a short time. And this necessitated that a number of people came together to help in the realization of the project. And I had underestimated how important this would be in my artistic journey. So these are just images of a few of the, views from different perspectives. And in the end, it ended up becoming a project that was installed on a billboard in the central part of Kumasi. And this is typically a very vibrant place. And the idea also was to have people engage the work as they are involved in their daily activities without it necessarily being one-day experience, because they actually walked into a gallery space or a museum space. So it was to meet them in their situation, and that was important. But I started to ask very, very important questions about art's role within all this. One of the things that had been important was how art managed to bring us all together. The number of people who were there helping in the realization of the project. I realized that then it was easy to see art as a junction, a kind of means for creating community. And this took me off to allow for me to start to explore what this community meant, what it means to work with the community, what it means for art to act as a kind of mediator and build, fashion a kind of sociality. And so I started to ask questions. What happens if the exhibition space is seen as a space of proposition, of process, of change rather than as one where conclusions of a research are presented. I think that a lot of the times I started to also look at the exhibition space. I realized that a lot of the times it can seem as though we are artists sharing things we've already concluded on, like research or experiments that we've done in our studios, rather than as one that allows us to make propositions, so that we are working it out sort of as we are exhibiting. So all of this, dilemma with community, with art as a mediator of sociality and all of that, and the exhibition space as one that allows for propositions, resulted in a 2019 project. Now this is significantly different from, the painterly form that I had explored in my early years as an artist. By this time, the city had started to inspire my work, and I started to go around to see if, I started to hear conversations. I started to also realize that there was material that people were producing just by living. And so I would usually I see a lot of those mini buses here as well. They're usually very boisterous and usually have a certain type of people in it, and so I was interested in that group of people. So I usually would take these buses up and down Kumasi, and within these buses you hear the most strange stories. You hear people just chat, and I would usually eavesdrop on their conversation, and this would be the basis of narratives. And a lot of the narratives came together because I was piecing several of them together. So what you see here as narrative 3 and 4 and 5, for instance, are a jumble of several narratives, and so they are made to be nonsensical, essentially. So for the 2019 project, there were a number of narratives put together that we meant to share with people who would reenact these narratives or be inspired by these narratives to do certain things within the city of Hamburg. This project was one that, the narratives were eventually garnered from Kumasi and taken to Hamburg, where the exhibition was held, to see what kind of actions could be instigated in Hamburg through them. Some of the places where these narratives have been garnered is Tech Junction, Eja Zongo, Sawaba, which are all towns or spaces within Kumasi. And the exhibition in Hamburg was curated by Julia Demant and Bernarda Clay Jackson. State of Affairs, So I realized once the narratives got into the space of Hamburg, they started to instigate actions in ways I could never have predicted. People encountered these narratives and then decided to respond to them. So there was something very generative about it. It seemed like a process, an algorithmic process, where we were attempting to find a pattern within data sequences so that people would have the narratives and respond in ways and share. So I learned a lot from the meme culture. They will share it naturally because they found it ridiculous or funny or absurd, and then other people will continue to respond to it. But this led to the entire Hamburg space becoming this strange space where it was very difficult to totalize what the project really was, because several things were happening, were sprawling at different parts of Hamburg, and it was difficult to ascertain exactly what action was connected to the project or not. It also meant that it produced a situation where the project by itself was boundless and almost undocumentable, because there were several things happening within the city. These became very important for current projects, these realizations. Yeah, so I started to think then, what would happen if a project is boundless? What does a boundless form look like? What does it mean for a form to be difficult to totalize, to be difficult to document? What does it mean that it's imponderable? Yeah, so this took the entire city of Hamburg, and one of the things that it also instigated was an actual protest. And by the time of this exhibition, the Estadio Social had started in 2019, which was against a couple of protests against the Chilean presidents because of some difficulties Chileans were experiencing, which had to do with inaccessibility to basic things, but also violence against them from a group that should have been protecting them. And some of this protest had seeped from Chile into Hamburg, and somehow the project and the narratives instigated this as well, or I don't know, inspired it. I don't even know what really happened, but this really is the video. So the responses to the narratives varied from overtly political to covertly political responses. I think the most overtly political response was the protest, and yeah, but there were also a number of responses that had taken place within the gallery space and outside of it. So there was one that allowed also for performances, or even the protest which took place outside the gallery to come into the gallery and go out. So all of these ideas about something moving in of the gallery, moving in from inside the gallery to outside the gallery and back inside, and all of these dynamics and flows was one of the things that was important to me. But the narratives formed became a kind of prompt. I started to think of them as prompts for actions. But really, as all of these things were going on, and the videos from different parts of the city, because one of the things that we agreed to do, one of the things we agreed to do as participants of this project was to stream everything that we were going to be doing outside the city into the exhibition space. And I was going to be in the gallery space DJing the videos, so that several videos are streaming in, and at different points I'm determining what video is playing. And this was going to be showing in a black box. So in the video, there's this space, a black box, where people are looking and they're seeing just videos coming in. But at the time also, I was experimenting with a program I had never used before. So what you see actually through the videos playing are glitches. I'm trying to learn as I'm going, and they are glitches. So I'm not even working with it from a position of an expert. We are working it out as we are going. Yeah, so these are some of the places where in Chile, where the protest had started, and it was led in Hamburg by 3 of the people listed there. But it somehow seeped into Hamburg, the Rathaus, Reeperbahn, Consulates of Chile, and so most of the performances had taken the entire Hamburg, city of Hamburg, as its, space for exploration. And then the protest obviously moved in. But there's something about this project. It was also very chaotic. I mean, it's one of those projects that's very difficult to totalize. There's something about it that's very chaotic, and maybe that's a thing with boundless projects or projects that attempt to be boundless in form. So it was imponderable. It was impossible to totalize. It evaded absolute documentation, and these were all qualities I loved about the work. Now, this inspired ongoing projects, and I have 2 ongoing projects. I will take you through the first and the second later. One of the projects that is currently inspired by some of the decisions made from It's a Fluke Trust Me, which is a 2019 project. Is learning from an onion working as a DJ. Clearly, the idea of a DJ has come again somehow. So by 2023, I had experienced, by 2019, it was actually I was just getting out of an artistic funk. And this was what resulted in the 2019 It's a Fluke Trust Me. And then in this case, after a long wait, I decided to explore some archives in Ghana's National Archives, which is a space where so many archives about the dealings of the nation exist. And I realized when I experienced the data there, when I went there and started to exhume these archives, that I was overwhelmed by the sheer number of archives that existed to explore. And because it was also something that related, that was also connected to collective history, it was just impossible to unpack all of these by myself. As a result of this, I set up a WhatsApp group. I sent out an invite, an open call, to have people, I'll move between the slides. I set up an open call to have collaborators join me, so we could exhume these archives together. And most of the archives had to do with most of the archives I encountered had to do with our first president, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, who I think is a very strange man. It's not also, I think I was interested in him as a person because of how, like the enigma, there's something enigmatic about him. There's a strangeness to his character. It almost seems as though he's human and then he's also not. And I think it's just because of the stories that have been told about him. And somehow the stories exist in such a way that it's difficult to tell facts from fiction, And I like all of these difficulties with him as a character. But it's also that a lot of the ideas he was expressing, which I didn't know at the time I was exhuming this archive, had to do with discussing an egalitarian vision. This only lasted between 1957 to 1966. He was overthrown in 1966. So it feels to me like a dream that suddenly got buried after 1966. And it was nice to exhume it, see what he was saying, what it meant for us, not as a post-mortem of it. I think typically when people are working with archives, they're attempting a post-mortem of this thing that happened. This was to allow for us to access his thoughts in order to envision a future together. So we were hoping to work out a collective future. Now, So one of the questions, a few of the questions that became important in this was, what fictions are necessary today? Does it matter whose or what fiction our realities are founded on? What might a common world look like? What might a community founded on egalitarian principles look or feel like? What does it mean to coexist or collaborate? Is it a collaboration? I mean, these are a lot of the questions that explorations, yeah. And so we looked at the character in Nkrumah and the archives we were exhuming, and it wasn't really because we were interested in having a history lesson as well. So it wasn't a postmortem, it also wasn't a history lesson. It was to have Nkrumah function, or his thought, functioning as a kind of hyperparameter for a new vision. When I talk about a hyperparameter, I'm talking about something that it's like having bread baked in an oven, but then determining, so hyperparameter becomes the temperature that determines how the bread is formed. It doesn't necessarily become a key part of what the bread is, but it becomes a necessary condition to forming this bread. So he doesn't become, he's not going to be a part of what this thing is, but he would have determined, his thoughts would have determined or shaped what this thing becomes somehow. Yeah, so his thought, as someone who was pushing for lots of egalitarianism, a lot of egalitarian thoughts, was important. But we couldn't replicate Nkrumah from 1960s. We are not living in 1960. We're not living in 1957. We're living in 2024, several years later. And we realized that in order for us to be able to make sense of it, we needed to be able to work out new fictions, which are necessary today. So the group that came together through WhatsApp, through the open call, and then eventually came together through WhatsApp, would usually have these occasional, what we call assemblies, to just exhume these archives and discuss what it meant, and and all of this, So it became a situation for us for sharing, of perceiving, of knowing, and exploring. But it was also that in that period, 1957 to 1966, we see how suddenly several architectural structures sprout. And they're usually architectural structures that sprout in collaboration with other groups. Typically, the socialist nations, usually Eastern European countries. So Ghana had several of these factories suddenly sprouting. But it was also, Accra suddenly had a new look. Accra suddenly started to look different, and through some of the archives I found, it was also that plastic, for instance, became an important exploration, like a material to explore within these new architectural structures. So for us, architecture became an important starting point. We started to think, okay, that it means architecture becomes a very important differentiator between the regime before it and the regime after. It becomes a differentiator between a regime that prized a master-servant, because that was a colonial one, a master-servant relation, over one that attempted to fashion an egalitarian one. But for us, architecture was not going to be replicated in the same way as like a 3D structure. We were going to look at architecture as a kind of sociality, rather than as one that is about buildings, mortar, brick and mortar, but one that engineers a kind of sociality. And we see this play out when we look at the Ghana National Construction Corporation, which was one of the governmental institutions set up to carry out all governmental projects in the country. And typically, one of the things that you see with the GNCC was a very collaborative work between Ghanaian architects and foreign professionals. It was to allow for very equal dealings, one that was built on very mutual respect, and one that saw everyone as equal. And so a lot of what you saw was very good exchange, very good working relations between Ghana, people from Ghana, and mostly people from socialist nations like Bulgaria, Hungary, Yugoslavia, and all of this. So this became a very good model for us to learn from. We realized okay, it means that even though architecture was important in this period, it was even important more for the kind of sociality that it engineered, not so much even just the style, the architectural style, but the fact that it was attempting a very egalitarian relation. And we see this also with the construction of the International Trade Fair, which was one of the projects Nkrumah commissioned. And then we also see this in even the name, the People's Shop, which was constructed in 1962, commissioned by Nkrumah. Yeah, so for us, architecture suddenly in this project, architecture is not understood as the construction or designing of buildings. It's a construction of a kind of sociality. But so it becomes a construction of an architecture of the future, essentially, through the inspiration of Nkrumah's thoughts. So by the time we started this open call, 40 participants came together from various countries, including Ghana, Nigeria, Italy, USA. And we've had moments of sharing, and most of it sharing and meetings and assemblies have had to be done over Zoom. We've also determined that Zoom meetings through WhatsApp calls, thank God for WhatsApp calls, it's been very good for us. And usually these assemblies are open to people outside of even the group. So typically we will have posters designed that will be shared outside of the group, so we can have more people join, even if they are not in the WhatsApp. So the WhatsApp group for us was an opportunity to look outward rather than to be insular in our perspectives. And it was also about using already existing technologies like program applications like WhatsApp and Zoom to achieve different results. So we were thinking to use them differently. And as a result of the number of Zoom meetings we were having, we decided as a group to start to build a repository. And this repository was going to have details of all of these archival material we were encountering. It was also going to have a repository, the recordings of meetings. It was also going to have, the results of personal and collective explorations. It was going to have all of these details, even attempts at accessing grants. All of those were going to be, so it was going to be a really transparent process, so that anybody who joins the project is able to join in, because we thought of it as like a ginger, where there's always an opportunity to graft onto it at different points. So you're always in the middle. There's never a privileged point of engaging in the project. You're always in the middle. So this means that even though we had 40 people, for instance, joining the group, over the months, it has morphed. People have left, people have joined, new sprouts have started, old sprouts have died, and all of this. And this is an example of a few of the posters we've designed now on my left, calligraphy and rerouted appointments, which was one of the self-initiated projects. But of course, by this time, a lot of the posters was also inspired by liberation movements or groups like the Medu Ensemble, but also even the Black Panther movement posters, which were typically designed by Henry Douglas. And so all of these became inspirational for us. The typical use of text, the very bright colors, the focus on lines and all of that, they became very important for us. And then also the simplicity, usually, even of these posters. There's an urgency, usually, in the way the posters are made. Also because usually it is a matter of urgency, trying to use very little means to do something. Yeah. And so as part of the project, so it becomes a project that sprouts several projects and several WhatsApp groups. Although we have a main or parents cell, there are also other smaller WhatsApp groups that have been organized. And for us, we think of it as, we really have learned from the onion. Like, the onion has a vegetative reproductive system, so that you have different other onions or bulbs that are able to sprout out of one bulb. But usually they are depending on this bulb for nourishment, this parent's bulb for nourishment. So we think of the different other WhatsApp groups as that, because they feed directly into the parents' WhatsApp group feeds directly into the other WhatsApp groups, the newly generated ones. But we also think of projects like this because as part of it, participants are encouraged to carve out their own paths and initiate other projects from the bigger project. I use big cautiously, but they are encouraged to form their own groups out of the groups and allow for those groups that they form to have people even outside of the bigger group. And we think of that, and that's where I mentioned sea journeys very early on in the beginning. And sea journeys have this ability, like the parent cell has an ability to dislodge, to have a part of it dislodged, and it forms a new specialized cell that is almost independent of the parent cell. So this, usually for groups like this or projects like this, the group is meant to self-fund and find means of working things out. So this was one of the projects by Manuela Necoloni, who is Italian, but somehow was able to join the project on Ghana's history. Yeah, because there's a shared, aesthetic. There's a shared history of modern architecture. Yeah. So for us, the archive becomes a lived experience rather than as something that you see you can totalize. It's like having Cape Town be an archive where you are walking through it and living it and breathing it in and exhaling it and becoming a part of this. The archive, usually the discussions about archives usually are that spaces in the global south do not have some archives, some spaces in the global south do not have some archives. But the moment we start to problematize or at least expand or challenge our notions of what an archive is, we realize that suddenly spaces within the global south are sprawling with archives. For instance, Kumasi can become a very important archive of architecture, and also suddenly KNUST can become a very rich archive of modernist architecture, for instance. So we start to challenge some of these so that it transforms assumed lack into abundance. So that's really some of so this project is still ongoing. It's been ongoing since 2022, and it's a very difficult project. It's a project that makes me realize that a common world is not necessarily one that is harmonious. That there are frictions, and all of these frictions are important to what this world is. It also makes me think of the fossilization of things, which is a very slow process of building and subtraction and addition and all that. That's how I think of this project, a slow process, a slow project, so that it's like living, it is living. Now the second project and the last project I will discuss today is the Clay Bricks Ukunganya, which is a project that is also still ongoing in Uganda. Now by 2023, a number of us moved to Uganda, Kampala first, because we're going to be having the exhibition, forgotten the name, I will remember. Excuse me. Yes. Silent Invasions, The Art of Material Hacking, and it had been curated by Namtumi Violet, Yulia Gimans, Tracy Nakwashi Thompson, and Zitoni Tristan Tani, and Saskia Bela. Yeah, so 5 curators. And it was curated in the city Masaka, so not Kampala, but Masaka. Masaka is a coffee growing space. It's a space that has contributed a lot to Uganda's wealth, but through coffee, like growing coffee. So but it's also a transit point for a lot of people who want to move to other parts of Uganda. So there are all of these dynamics about Masaka. It's a very simple city. And going there, I wanted the city to inspire work rather than just go there. But I had gone there thinking that at least one of the things I would be interested to do is to work with a material that is very common, like clay or sand or or water. I wanted it to be a material that was not very intimidating, at least that it's familiar. And then I got there and realized that, Masaka didn't have at least we were not able to find a community that is a pottery community, for instance. Most of them are probably farmers because it's an agrarian region. But one of the things I noticed between Kampala and Masaka was the use of bricks in the construction of their buildings, which is very different from Ghana, where we usually use cement blocks instead of bricks. And somehow clay bricks, clay brick okumanya is essentially the production of pink bricks, which is down here, or magenta colored bricks, 125 of them. But this is inspired by the city of Kampala, of Masaka in Uganda. So once we got there for the exhibition, I noticed that it was going to be difficult to have a pottery community, for instance, if I wanted to work with a material like clay. But I had visited a craft shop, which is the Emily Craft Center in Masaka, a craft shop that is built to serve the people of Masaka. So typically things there are meant to be very affordable. I get there trying to find information from the crafts, from the person who was looking after the shop, or about people who produce ceramic objects, just to find out if there's a pottery community. And then, I find out that there is no community like that. At least he knows no community like that. But as I'm speaking to him, I realize also how unique the Emily Craft Center is. It's positioned in such a way that it's in the entry point of the building. It's literally in the way. You have to go through it in the bigger building, which is a resource center in Masaka. You have to pass by it in order to go there. As I'm engaging him, I see this strange soapstone sculpture in several colors. And I'm engaging him, and I decide to get the soapstone sculpture as a way of thanking him for his time. But this for me was cue number 1. I knew that, okay, I didn't know what we were going to do with this, but this would be cue number 1 for the project. Now we were going down, so we were just exploring the city of Masaka. As I said, the city was meant to be the main inspiration for the project. We're going around the city of Masaka, and Masaka has this newly built Masaka Central Market, or Masaka City Central Market. And this was built by the government recently to replace the 19th markets that had been there since the 1930s. But this market is built, the government intends to build 12 others of similar, 12 other structures like this. But by this market, I saw a pile of bricks that was going to be used as an extension of this market. But this market is different because it's one that the government intends for low-income market people, like people who really are in a difficult position. It's meant to house not just any type of vendor or trader, ones that earn a certain amount, very little amounts of money. So they describe them as low-income traders. So yeah, this brick was meant as an extension of this Masaka City market. Masaka City. I keep forgetting. Masaka City Central Market. On the side here. So I asked for one of them, intended for it to be a kind of Q2. And I realized, okay, how about we create pink bricks, or magenta bricks inspired by the soapstone sculpture, which is not even originally from Uganda, which is imported from Kenya into Uganda by craftspeople. Almost sculptural, but also crafts-based. With the, rustic, because Masaka also has a very specific brick that is different from bricks produced in Kampala, typically bigger. So you can immediately see how this two translates into this. So what we actually have here is a simulation of this brick, this actual brick that was picked from the side of Masaka, the market. So it's not a figment of my imagination. It's actually that the brick was sent to be scanned, and then the soapstone sculpture was also, the color was extracted out of it and then used to model this. So using photogrammetry methods, we're able to develop this model in clay brick Okunganya. And Okunganya actually means in Luganda, gathering. Yeah, so this was us, but of course, besides the, putting together pink and magenta and a brick together in a 3D model, there's also the work that has to be done in the construction of this brick. You have to know the different types of clay that exist in Uganda. You have to know which one would work, has a better affinity to the oxides, what kind of oxides would work, what the shrinkage of this brick is, the water absorption and all of that, to be able to even know if it's possible to replicate the exact brick I picked from the Masaka Central Market. So this was really us going, so we had to work with a material scientist to be able to understand the different clays that exist in Masaka, in Uganda, to also be able to understand the material quality of this brick, or this clay, this substance, to be able to know if which would be better suited or best suited for the work that we had here. So this is us just crashing, and it's a very laborious process of finding this, understanding even how clay works. And also realizing that clay isn't even one thing. There are several different properties. So we're essentially looking for one that had properties already that allowed it to work with oxides and all. Yeah. So this is this is the generation of the 3D model. This is the actual work towards creating that. This is also the generation of the 3D model, and in the end we have this. But this eventually also meant that we had to work with the material scientists who was at the Mutesa the second university in Masaka. We also had to work with the Saint Kizito Institute, to be able to, which is a technical institute for training blue collar people to fill in blue collar roles. So hair braiders, plumbers, construction workers, all of that. And we are working with them to build these 125 clay bricks. But these clay bricks are also supposed to be eventually sent to the KNUST so that the Department of Architecture can envision new architectural structures inspired by this clay brick. And currently Sarau, which is the South African Radio Astronomy Organization, is also helping to print a 3D model of the brick, of the paint brick. Yeah, so this is an ongoing project. So yeah, but of course, within the making of this project, it seems every single process matters. The temperature of the kiln, the fact that the kiln is front loading instead of top loading, the fact that heat is distributed a particular way within the kiln, the fact that oxides react with clay in a particular way, the ratio of oxides to clay that produces a kind of magenta, what happens when heat acts on it. So it's all of these dynamics are really important to the making of this project. And yeah, I think it's one of the things that excites me about this project. Yeah, so thank you so much.